I had set the cameras up and everything, right?
Yes.
And I'm driving up Main Street. I've got a camera on the front, and there's a moped in front of me, and they wipe right out.
Wow.
Just goes to show you got to be careful. They had helmets on. They were the rental ones. You know
what Lepre said in his book Island Practice? No sense renting a moped. I'll just hit you with a bat and run over you with a lawnmower, and you'll have the same effect.
You know what the problem with those things is? They're underpowered for one. The wheels are too small.
Oh.
So being underpowered means that you got to stay on the right side of the road where all the sand is, and that's where the danger is. If you had enough, you don't see motorcycles falling down all the time.
No,
it's mopeds.
Were they on the cobblestone?
Yeah, and they wiped out on the cobblestone. So
did they hurt themselves?
No.
Oh.
No, they were all right. I actually talked to the guy. So how are you?
I'm good.
I'm sorry I'm a little late. It's
that's
hectic, hectic morning.
Yeah.
I like to be on time, though. Good. I'm sure you do, too.
I do.
Good. Wow, so how's the church going? Oh, we have to wear our seatbelts.
All right.
How's it going?
The church is good. We call it a meeting house.
Oh, we don't call it a church anymore. Everybody calls it the Unitarian Church.
I know. So I do often, too, just so they remember where we are. Because we're trying to move towards the language of the Unitarian Universalist Meeting House, because we have a Muslim prayer group there.
Okay.
And they meet in the summer every Friday mid-afternoon to do prayer.
How many members do you have of that?
They're growing. Maybe 15, yeah.
15?
Yes, Dr. Qureshi.
But only in the summertime?
Only in the summer, yes. Dr. Qureshi and his wife and his 5 children make up a big part of it.
Okay. I don't know if I know him.
Yeah, he's a dermatologist. He comes to Ireland. Yeah,
I see.
He's a lovely man.
Actually, I do know who he is.
Yeah, his family's lovely. They're just really wonderful people who believe in service and love and hope and community.
Yep.
I've learned a lot from them, actually. And then we have Sharat Hayam that's met here, I think, for 37 years. That's a Jewish congregation.
Right.
And we have Farah Delus, and Sharat Hayam means Song of the Sea, and Farah Delus means lighthouse in Spanish, and they have been with us, I think, about 8 years, and they are an El Salvadoran Christian group, and they meet 3 times a week, all throughout the year. And then we have the Unitarians, so we're trying to be a meeting house because, of course, we have a mosque, a synagogue, a church, and
That's amazing.
Yeah.
How is it going? I mean, is it growing? Are all denominations growing from what you've seen?
Not statistically, no. I know that some evangelical congregations have been growing, but all of these congregations are the Jewish and the Muslims, and of course the Unitarians are very reformed in their, they're the liberal branch of their faiths.
Yes.
And it's not liberal branches of faith, sadly, that are growing, and I don't know why. Because in these times that are
we're going to talk about these times too.
Yeah, extremism.
It's pretty crazy. Where were you born? Where are you from?
Manchester, New Hampshire. I was born.
Wow. Good old New Hampshire. You gotta love it.
Yeah, right? And I grew up in Dover, New Hampshire.
And what did your parents do?
My father sold cars, and my mother is a daughter of Azorean immigrants.
Interesting.
And she grew up my father grew up in Cambridge and Arlington. He was the son of a milkman, and who also drove the buses in Cambridge. And my mother grew up in Somerville, and her father was a carpenter. And both my father's mother and my mother and my grandmothers were stay-at-home moms. So my mom did end up working and doing other pieces with her life, but none of them are college educated or had positions of real authority. But they sure did in their families, however.
Were you more influenced by your mother or father, would you say?
It's interesting on the Myers-Briggs test that we have to take to become Unitarian Universalist ministers.
Okay.
There's many things we have to do. That's one of them. And I come up right, and I've taken it like 4 times trying to trick the system and answer differently each time. Every single time I come out right on the line between extrovert and introvert. And my father's an extrovert and my mother's an introvert. And I really have to say that I can see both of them in me. Yeah, I really can.
Interesting.
And in different phases of my lives, my life, as one would have it, I can see different ones of them dominating, or certainly my more patient, gracious self is my mother.
I see.
Yeah.
Well, I can see that.
Yeah.
You are gracious.
Oh,
No doubt
thank
about that.
you.
Oh,
thank
absolutely.
you. My mother's twice that.
Wow.
And my more fierce.
Mom is still living? And both mom and dad?
Not dad. He died 20 years ago.
Okay.
Mom is still so gracious. And my father was fierce and wouldn't take no for an answer and would take risks and chances.
Okay.
And that's...
I can see that in you too.
Yeah.
So, what did you want to be when you were a kid? What were you thinking that you...
A doctor.
You did?
I did.
You did? Like a medical doctor?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Did you go to school for that?
No. Nope.
Yeah. But why do you think you wanted to be a doctor? What was it about being a doctor?
You know, it's interesting that as part of the process of becoming a minister includes having to get your first unit of clinical pastoral education, so being a chaplain intern at a hospital. And before I became a minister, I also worked in a hospital as a chaplain intern. So I just am so attracted. I was able finally to voice what my attraction was. And I don't know if doctors are humble, but I'm so attracted to, in a hospital setting, I just remember who I am. My sense of, ego or arrogance, or that I need this, or, people are stripped of their, bling, right? I mean, they can't have anything on.
Right.
So there's this leveling effect in a sense.
Yep.
And are so vulnerable and so willing to receive kindness and love.
They're more apt to be open.
Yes.
So that feeds you. You like that. That's what attracted you. The fact that you could give and they could possibly take it because they were more open.
I've never put it that way, Gino, but perhaps.
I think there's always a give and take in life. We're all looking.
I think altruism
we're all selfish in a way.
I agree.
You know what I mean?
No, it's so true. Altruism, I believe, is always part of ego. I mean, we always get what we give. No question.
And if we know
I am
that,
no
then
martyr,
we know where we stand. I mean,
so
and that's
true.
a great place to start.
Yeah.
So, were you religious when you were younger?
One more thing I'd like to say about that is that what I really loved in those conversations was that the intimacy was just sort of immediate and authentic. And in that kind of a setting, in the setting of suffering, I would just remember who I am, in my core self.
Yeah.
All those little to-do lists, or I wish I had, or why can't someone else do what I want them to, that spinning would quiet. And I would just remember why I'm here and who I am.
So this was happening
at Brigham and Women's. I was a chaplain in Dover, New Hampshire, and at Brigham and Women's.
So you knew you wanted to be a doctor, but you were in your early 20s when you did this? This happened later.
Yes.
So what'd you do in your early 20s? Where was your head at then? You did.
I lived in India for a year.
You did. See.
As soon as I graduated from high school, I was accepted to college, and I didn't go.
You didn't?
No.
Because you were, why? Because what was calling was
fell in love.
Oh, you did? A guy?
Yeah.
Oh, and he was the traveling type?
I didn't travel with him, actually.
I see.
No, I didn't travel with him. I traveled by myself to India.
Ooh.
Yeah.
Do you regret that? Do you regret not going to school, or guys? I had that similar instance.
I know. By the time I went to college, University of New Hampshire, I was 30 years old and a single mother. And I studied economics.
Oh, wow, okay.
Yeah, and I took 6 years to finish.
I see, but those 20s, though, that's where we form ourselves.
In my 20s, I lived in India.
Yep.
I lived on
Were you affected by the religion in India as well? And the spiritual, the whole Indian lifestyle?
Not at that time. I just gone back to India and Nepal for 2 months last year.
Okay.
As a sabbatical, and really deepened my understanding of Buddhism particularly.
Okay, Buddhism, not Hinduism.
No, at that time I lived with Hindus though.
Okay.
And You know what? I always used to say, people would say, what are your two most important experiences? And I would say giving birth and living in India for a year.
Yeah.
And what I learned, really, honestly, was, I was 21 years old. I turned 22 in India. I traveled. I lived in I got so afraid I lived in a convent for a while.
Why were you scared?
It was have you ever been
culture
to India?
shock. No.
It's so.
But I've had culture shock.
Yeah, it was so.
And at the age, you're more apt to get it.
Yeah, it's true. And being alone as a woman, I felt very vulnerable. And it's just compared to what I was used to, a very, very different culture.
Unreal. So you went to a convent for safety?
I did, and I lived there for about a month or 2 months, and I worked with them in an orphanage, and there were people who had young people without limbs, who had diseases all over their bodies. So I didn't realize how much I would grow and learn in that convent.
I bet.
But I learned so much.
Oh, I'm sure you did. That would have been amazing. So you hung out with nuns a lot.
And then I met the first thing that happened actually is I got off the plane in Calcutta, and I walked out into the world and I said, I can't do this. And I got back on the plane and I flew to what was then Bombay, now Mumbai, and got out in Bombay, and I could hardly breathe. I was so overcome, and I was so young, and I stayed in in a hotel, and I was sitting in a cafe one day, and or some kind of something, and I was probably at that time, things have changed in India. I went back this past year and things have become different. But I was the only woman in the place. People would stare at me, and a group of Iranian men came and sat with me, 3 Iranian men. That was a time of Khomeini. And they were here studying, so they wouldn't have to go back, because if they went back, they would have been killed. They were
in India.
They were, yep.
Yeah. And studying so that they wouldn't go back.
Yes.
Right.
And they sat down with me, and we had a nice conversation, and they said, would you like to get on our motorcycles and come back to Pune with us? And I said yes. And I went and got my things.
Jeez.
And I got on the back of that motorcycle, and I went to Pune, and these people treated me like a princess. I moved in with them and their families. I didn't cook, I didn't clean. When I showered, people would hold up. I have never been. They wouldn't let me spend a dime. I've always had a softness for Iranian men since this time. They were so kind and generous to me.
I have Iranian Persian family members. They're married by marriage.
Yes.
So I know the culture very well.
Well, that was my only real experience.
So you went to Pune, but Pune now that's hot spot, right? That's where there's a lot of esoteric stuff going on in Pune. A lot of people go there to.
They used to. The white women who had been there hadn't helped. In that they were in a place in their lives where they were searching and exploring and participating.
Is that the Bhagwan was? The Bhagwan Sri Rajneesh?
I think so, yes.
Yeah, I hung out with those people too.
As a white woman, there were assumptions made of me from the white woman they had met. So I ended up, I had long hair then, and I would dress in not saris but Punjabi clothes. And after I was living with these Iranian men, I lived in the convent for a time. And then I found a position up in the Western Ghats, in the hills, in a school that was started by Gandhi. And I lived in that school for about 5 months. It had a tin roof, and monkeys would jump on the roof, and a dirt floor, and a cold buckets you would get for your shower. And I met a man, Dinkar Padikon, I'll never forget him. He was 60, I was 22, and he became my mentor. He called me his ambassador to America. And we would ride our bikes, and he would come at night, and he would bring me a book, and he would say, read this book, and I'll be back tomorrow, or I'll be back in 3 days to see what you think. And he would knock on my door, the history of the world by Nehru, the Bhagavad Gita. I learned so much from this generous, beautiful man.
And you were open, obviously, I mean, from being so scared to where you were, you're riding your bike around thinking, man, I am on top of the world here, right? This is life. I am living it. This is where I want to be, right?
I never really got there, Gino.
You didn't say it then?
No, I never did.
Still too young.
I said to myself, I'm not going to leave this country until I can walk away instead of run away.
Right. And that's where I'm getting.
Well, I would wake up in the morning in that school and run on the tar, and it would run very early above the Krishna River. We were in Panchgani, and there would be these huge snakes this fat that would come out on the tar to sun themselves.
Wow.
I mean, I never got to the place where I was like, oh, I'm home now.
No, of course not.
Yeah.
But you felt comfortable enough to where your spirit started to grow.
I did.
Yeah, I mean, this had big influence on you, didn't it?
Well, this is what I said. People said, what did you learn from being in India? And I said, I learned about who I was. Because nothing outside of me reflected me back to myself.
Yeah.
Nothing. The moon, I remember I was in Goa, I traveled to Goa for a time, and I remember looking up at the so-called man in the moon, and he was turned looking away from me. And I thought, not even the man in the moon will look at me. And in that narcissistic, cultural narcissism. And everything was so different from who I was that I was pushed back on myself. And I really had to look at who I was. And it was, I think everyone should go to India at that age, because I learned that belief, truth, what's proper and improper, what's beautiful and not beautiful is socially constructed, culturally constructed. It was such an important lesson to me. Religion, all of it. It's a product of, certainly love and the mystery that we see and feel, but culture and history and migration and weather and language, and boy, I learned so much about.
So when you finally left, you said you spent a year.
Yeah.
How were you different, and where did you think you wanted to go then, or did you know?
I left there.
'Cause you were only 22, 23.
I was 22.
Yeah.
I left there and got a job in Ireland on a cargo ship.
Oh God. Oh my gosh.
Bringing milk powder to the Canary Islands in Africa, off of Africa.
Were you alone again, or did you have a boyfriend with you?
No, I did. My boyfriend from the States had met me then in Ireland.
Okay, so you guys kind of worked together for
We did, yeah. And not in India, but when I left India, he met me.
Okay,
And then we would bring milk powder to the Canary Islands and then go empty to Lisbon, and then pick up wood and bring it to Ireland. And I did 2 rounds of that and hopped ship.
Wow.
That was pretty.
That's cool.
They were Portuguese. Interestingly, on the ship were all Portuguese people.
Wow.
Yeah.
Cool.
Who thought when I came on board that I was Indian. Because I was still dressed in my Indian garbs. And they thought I was an Indian.
Wow.
Yeah, my mother's Portuguese.
Oh my God. That's great. Do you speak Portuguese, by the way?
No, my mother, at the time my mother was growing up, her mother spoke very little English.
Yeah.
And she did speak Portuguese, but in those days in America, all people wanted to do was blend in.
Yeah, exactly.
And so many people like my mother gave up their language and their culture to be, so like everyone else or so.
Yeah.
So no, I don't, and neither does she now. No. Yeah. So I ended up hopping ship in Portugal, going through Portugal, living in below the Pyrenees with the Basque people in Spain, which were in a tent in an orchard.
Whoa! Boy, you really pushed it.
Yeah.
Huh?
Yeah.
You were pushing it. This is going to be, I'm going to learn from people, right? You went out actually trying to learn from other people. You had that instinct to.
I was just following I don't know what I was doing. We met some people who were Basque at a cafe, and they said, come and stay with. We were just living open-heartedly.
Yeah, right.
Whatever came, and luckily nothing came.
Right.
Well, actually, we went to France. We crossed over the Pyrenees. We were hitchhiking, and we got a ride from a truck driver. It was so beautiful, those mountains. And then we picked grapes in France.